I never thought I'd be telling this story, but here I am. It's hard to even say the words out loud. My best friend, my brother, for 15 years, betrayed me in a way I never imagined possible. We shared everything, our secrets, our struggles, our laughs and our triumphs. I thought I knew him, trusted him, and in a way, he was more than a friend. He was family. You see, this story isn't just about losing a friend. It's about losing a bond that I thought was unbreakable. Mike had been there for me in ways no one else had, through the highs and lows of life, from the days of high school all the way through my marriage to Charlotte. The thought of him betraying me was unthinkable. I remember the night it all changed. It didn't come with loud accusations or dramatic confrontations. No, it came quietly, like a thief in the night. Just a few small cracks, unnoticed at first. Missed calls, plans that never quite materialized. And then one day, I got a text from Charlotte that shook my world. At that moment, everything I thought I knew about my best friend and even my wife shattered in an instant. The betrayal wasn't just that he drifted away. It was something far deeper, and I had no idea it was coming. None. Until it hit me like a cold wave that knocked me off my feet. Before we dive deeper into this story today titled Losing a Best Friend, The Pain of Betrayal After 15 Years, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying this journey, and give this video a thumbs up. Your support energized us for sharing these intimate stories, and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. I met Mike back in high school. He was the guy who could make anyone laugh, who always had your back, no matter what. At 33, Mike is still that guy, the one who can light up a room just by walking in. We clicked from day one and it never stopped. For 15 years, Mike and I shared everything, from the first beers we ever drank together, to our first heartbreaks, to the times we celebrated our successes. We were inseparable. Life, it seemed, couldn't shake us apart. When I met Charlotte, I never imagined the kind of bond we'd create. She was 29 then, smart, beautiful, and supportive in ways I hadn't even realized I needed. We'd been together for 7 years, married for almost 5, and during all that time she'd been my rock, my constant. She was also there for Mike when he went through one of the hardest things in his life, losing his girlfriend. It wasn't easy for him, I could see that. Losing someone you love, especially in a way that feels like it's out of your control, it breaks you. So Charlotte and I both did everything we could to support him. She became a pillar of support for Mike during that time. The three of us spent hours talking, and I could see how much Mike relied on her to help him heal. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Charlotte was just being who she is, kind, caring, and compassionate. Mike was the best man at my wedding. I remember standing there, watching him give his speech, thinking about all the years of friendship that had led me to this moment. If the situation had been reversed, I would have been honored to stand by his side too. It seemed like we were all bound together, me, Charlotte, and Mike. It felt like nothing could come between us. How could it? We had been through so much together. We shared countless trips, deep conversations about life, love, and everything in between. There were so many nights spent talking until the sun came up, exchanging advice, sharing dreams. We were always there for each other. We were a team, a unit. And yet, somehow, I never saw it coming. At first, I didn't think much of it. Life happens. Mike had been through a lot, especially after losing his girlfriend. I figured he just needed some space. But then, the little things started to add up. He'd miss my calls. Nothing major at first, just one here and there. He'd apologize, say he'd been busy or tied up with something. I brushed it off. It made sense, right? He was going through his own stuff. I didn't want to pressure him, so I let it go. But then it started to happen more often. Plans we'd made to hang out, grab a beer, or catch up would fall through at the last minute. He'd cancel, or just stop responding altogether. It wasn't like him. Mike had always been the guy who was there. If we said we were going to do something, we did it, no excuses. But now, the cancellations started to become routine. And still, I told myself, it's nothing, he's just going through something. I tried not to think about it too much, but that nagging feeling, something wasn't right, just wouldn't go away. The worst part was the distance. I couldn't explain. It was like we were still in the same room, but I couldn't reach him anymore. Conversations started to feel off, like they had a different weight to them, a tension I couldn't pinpoint. I'd make a joke and it felt like he wasn't even listening. We'd talk about the usual things, sports, work, the kind of stuff we always talked about, but there was this strange lack of engagement. His responses were short, distracted, and every time I asked how he was doing, he'd just brush it off. "I'm good, man. Really busy." But I could see it in his eyes. Something had changed. I knew him too well to ignore it. He was becoming distant, and I couldn't figure out why. It wasn't like Mike to pull away like this. He'd always been the guy who was there when I needed him, no matter what. So why now? Why was he acting like this? I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I kept telling myself that maybe I was just overthinking it, that maybe he was dealing with his own struggles and needed space. I tried to be patient, to give him the time he needed. But the more time passed, the harder it became to shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something deeper than just being busy. Click subscribe and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. And then, the first real sign that this wasn't just about him going through a rough patch, that maybe something more was happening, I started noticing the way he'd look at Charlotte when we'd all hang out together. It wasn't anything blatant, nothing that screamed, "red flag," but it was there, just enough to make me wonder, a lingering look, a certain silence in his voice when he spoke to her, something that felt too familiar. I brushed it off at first. It wasn't like they hadn't always gotten along. Hell, Charlotte had been there for him when he lost his girlfriend. She was a good friend to him, maybe even closer than I realized. I didn't think much of it at the time, but then when I looked closer, I realized something I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just Mike pulling away. It was a distance between all of us, and though I couldn't see it clearly yet, something was shifting in a way I couldn't explain. A rift, just barely perceptible at first, was starting to open up, and I had no idea how deep it was about to go. It all hit me in one moment, a moment I will never forget. It started with a text message from Charlotte, simple, cryptic, and completely out of the blue. She never texted me like that. Usually it's a quick message, a love you, or I'll be home soon. But this time, it was different. The message simply said, "We need to talk. It's important." At first I thought nothing of it. She and I, well, we've been together for years and we've had our share of tough conversations. So when she said that, I thought maybe it was just about something small, a miscommunication, or maybe she just had something on her mind. I had no idea what I was about to walk into. I remember the feeling I had when I first saw the message, a quiet, uneasy sort of nagging at the back of my mind that I couldn't shake. But I brushed it off. Maybe I was just tired or overthinking things. But then came the second text, something I didn't quite understand at the time. Charlotte said, "Mike needs to talk to you too." I remember thinking, okay, maybe there's something going on with him I don't know about. After all, Mike had been going through a rough patch, losing his girlfriend, feeling like he had no one to turn to. Charlotte had been his support system for a while. I knew they'd been spending more time together, especially after he'd broken up with her. Maybe he needed advice, or maybe he was struggling with something personal. It didn't seem unusual at first. So I did what I always did when Mike asked to talk. I got in my car and drove over to his place, thinking it was just another one of those late-night talks. Nothing more, nothing less. I didn't suspect a thing. When I pulled up to Mike's house, it was quiet, like it always was. His porch light flickered in the distance, casting a dull glow over the yard. I could see his truck parked in the driveway. The place looked normal, no sign of anything out of the ordinary. I knocked on the door, thinking I'd walk in and we'd have another one of those talks about life, about moving on, and about whatever was going on in his head. But when Mike opened the door, something felt off. It wasn't the usual warmth the usual grin I always got from him. His face was cold, almost distant. He didn't smile. He didn't even say, "Ah." I tried to lighten the mood with a joke, something stupid, like always. "Hey man, did you get a new haircut, or are you just trying to look mysterious?" But Mike didn't laugh, not even a hint of a smile. He just stared at me, his eyes blank. That's when the first wave of unease hit me. My gut twisted, like something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I shrugged it off. Maybe he was just in a mood. Maybe I was reading too much into it. He led me into the living room, and that's when I saw her, Charlotte, sitting on the couch, tears streaming down her face. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't even said anything yet, but she was already crying. It was like someone had punched me in the stomach, and I had no idea why. I stood there, frozen in the doorway. I looked at Mike, then at Charlotte. She didn't say anything, just kept her eyes on the floor. And that's when Mike spoke. He looked at me, his voice steady, but there was something behind it, something I couldn't quite place, something that made my heart race and my hands clammy. "We need to talk," he said, and my chest tightened. I thought it was just another one of those tough conversations we'd been having for weeks, but the words that followed were the last words I ever expected to hear. "Andy, I don't know how to say this, but Charlotte and we're in love." Those words hit me like a freight train. I don't even know how to describe it. My mind was numb. I couldn't process what he was saying. I looked at Charlotte, who could barely look me in the eye, her face wet with tears. And I stood there, unable to move, unable to speak. I felt like the ground was disappearing beneath me, and the room was spinning. Mike kept talking. His words were like knives, each one cutting deeper into me. "I never meant for this to happen," he said. "But it did. And we want to be together." He said it like it was something so simple, so matter-of-fact, like it was just another step in his life. But it wasn't simple. Not for me. Not after everything we had been through together. Not after everything I had shared with him. Everything he had shared with me. I don't remember how long I stood there in silence, but it felt like hours. I couldn't move, couldn't think. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to do something. Anything to stop this from being real. But the words wouldn't stop echoing in my head. In love. The betrayal hit me all at once. Mike, my best friend, my brother, the guy I had trusted with everything. And Charlotte, my wife, the woman I had spent 7 years with. The woman I had vowed to love and protect, and now they were in love with each other. How long had this been happening? When did it start? How could they do this to me? To us? I had no answers, just a pit in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I was stuck in this nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Click subscribe and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. I don't think I fully understood what had happened until days later. I kept replaying everything in my head like I was trying to make sense of a puzzle that didn't fit. But the pieces just didn't add up. How long had this been happening? Why didn't I see it? Was I really that blind? There's a part of me that wishes I never found out, that I could have kept living in the illusion that Mike and Charlotte and I were just fine, that we were still the same. I felt like I was suffocating in confusion. The days that followed the conversation with Mike were a blur. I went through the motions, work, conversations, daily routines, but none of it meant anything. I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting back to that moment when Mike looked me in the eyes as if this was something that had been brewing for ages and just dropped the truth like it was nothing. Charlotte sitting there crying, and him telling me that they were in love. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could Mike betray me like that? He was the guy who had been there for me, who had stood by me through thick and thin. We were brothers. We had talked about everything: life, love, our futures. We had laughed together, cried together, and celebrated each other's victories. Hell, he was the best man at my wedding. How could this happen? It didn't take long for me to confront Charlotte. The moment I walked through the door, I knew we needed to talk. There was no getting around it. She didn't need to say anything at first. The look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. I asked her about it, and she just broke down. It was like everything I had feared was true. She told me she was sorry, but not in the way I needed her to be. She said she didn't mean to hurt me, that she never wanted to cause me pain, but the words stung. She told me that over time she had developed feelings for Mike, that it wasn't something she planned, but it just happened. I stood there, listening to her, but all I could feel was this growing emptiness in my chest. It's hard to explain. She said she didn't want to hurt me, but it felt like that was exactly what she had done. She had lied to me, kept this secret from me for who knows how long, and now she was asking me to understand? Then there was Mike. Mike called me a couple of days later, asking to meet. He told me he needed to talk. I was beyond confused. What could he possibly have left to say? What could he say that would make any of this better? But I agreed to meet him. I don't even know why I did. Maybe it was because deep down I still wanted to believe he wasn't the person who had done this to me. I wanted to give him a chance to explain, to hear him out. When I showed up at his place, he was different. There was no warmth, no jokes like we used to share. He didn't even greet me the way he normally would. He just led me inside, and there, sitting on his couch, was Charlotte, still crying, looking broken. The atmosphere was thick, heavy. Mike told me to sit down. And then, in the coldest, most matter-of-fact way, he said the words that cut deeper than anything. "I'm in love with your wife, Andy. I have been for a while, and we're going to be together." I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. It was like the floor had been ripped out from beneath me. Mike, my best friend, was sitting there, telling me that he and Charlotte were in love. I tried to wrap my head around it, but I couldn't. I couldn't comprehend it. Mike had always been my go-to guy, my brother. How could he do this to me? Mike apologized, sure, but the apology didn't make it better. It didn't make anything okay. He said that he never wanted to hurt me, that it wasn't something he planned, that it just happened. But how do you forgive that? How do you look at the man who stood next to you at your wedding and not feel the weight of the betrayal in every word, in every action? He told me that they had tried to keep it a secret, but eventually it just became impossible to ignore. It was clear that they had feelings for each other, feelings that neither of them could deny anymore. And just like that, in one conversation, everything that I had built over the years crumbled. There were no easy answers. There were no apologies that would make it right. I was standing there, my world shattered, trying to hold on to some shred of what we had. But it was gone. It was all gone. Mike, my best friend, and Charlotte, my wife, they were together and I was left in the wreckage. The hardest part? I still don't know when it all changed. Was it when Mike started to lean on Charlotte more than me? Was it when she started offering him the support that should have been mine to give? I don't know. But what I do know is that in one moment, everything I thought I knew about friendship, about loyalty, about love, it all fell apart. In the weeks that followed, I found myself sitting in silence more often than I wanted to admit. It's strange, but when you lose someone close to you, your mind seems to fixate on all the little moments you shared. I kept thinking about the Mike I used to know, the Mike who was there for me through everything, the one I turned to when I was lost, the one who knew me better than I knew myself. How did it all change so quickly? How did I not see it coming? Mike and I had been through so much together. He was my best man, for God's sake, and I would have been his. We shared memories that were supposed to last a lifetime. Trips, deep talks late into the night, laughs, advice. He was my brother, the person I would call when I didn't know what to do. I trusted him with everything. But now, I couldn't help but wonder, did I really know him, or was I just blind to the truth all these years? It's hard to wrap my mind around it. The Mike I knew would have never done this to me. But that Mike, he's gone. And in his place, there's a stranger. A stranger who betrayed me in the worst possible way. And what makes it worse is that this betrayal came from both of them. From Mike and from Charlotte. Charlotte. I never thought I'd be questioning everything with her. We've been married for almost 5 years, together for 7. I loved her. I thought I knew everything about her. But now, I'm left wondering if I ever truly did. How did she go from being my wife to this? Was she pretending all along? Or was this something that just happened? I keep asking myself if I missed something, if there were signs I ignored. The worst part, the part that cuts the deepest, it's the fact that this pain feels just as intense as losing Mike as a friend, maybe even more. The betrayal from Mike, the person who I thought was my brother, it hurts in a way I can't even describe. But then, there's the pain of losing Charlotte, my wife, the person who stood beside me when I thought I had everything, the person I thought I could trust with my soul. It's funny how quickly things can change. One moment everything is fine. The next your entire world is upside down. I keep wondering what's worse, the betrayal itself or the fact that I didn't see it coming. Was I that blind, or did they just get so good at hiding it? I keep thinking about the Mike I lost, the one who helped me when I was struggling, the one who listened when no one else did. He was the guy who knew all my fears, my insecurities, and my dreams. I don't know who he is now. The man who stood in front of me, cold and emotionless, wasn't the Mike I trusted. And that hurts more than anything. And Charlotte, she was my rock. We built a life together, we had plans, we talked about the future. But how do you come back from something like this? How do you look at the person you thought you knew and reconcile that image with the one that's standing before you now? It's like she's a stranger to me now. And I don't know if I can ever trust her again. The hardest part of it all is knowing that this isn't just about losing a best friend or a wife. It's about the loss of trust, the loss of a sense of security that I thought I had. It's the feeling that everything I've built, everything I believed in, has crumbled before my eyes, and I'm left standing in the wreckage, trying to figure out who I am without them. It's strange, isn't it? The people you think you can count on the most are sometimes the ones who end up hurting you the most. And I have to wonder as I sit here, struggling to process all of this. How do you move on from something like this? How do you rebuild your life after it's been shattered like this? I don't have all the answers yet. Maybe I never will. But I do know this. The pain of betrayal doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your trust. And it leaves a scar that doesn't heal overnight. It might never fully heal. Click subscribe and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. I remember the moment I realized I had to do something different. I couldn't keep living in this haze, drowning in questions I didn't have answers to. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever imagined, but I knew if I didn't start making decisions, I'd stay stuck in that darkness. I had to step away, from Mike, from Charlotte, from everything that had once felt so secure. I needed space to breathe, to think, to find my way back to who I was before all of this happened. It wasn't easy. Cutting ties with Mike was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. The guy I'd known for 15 years, the person I'd trusted with my life, my secrets, and my future, he was gone. And so was Charlotte, the woman I had shared my life with for almost 7 years, the one who promised to stand by me in every moment, now felt like a stranger. But in that moment, I had no choice. I had to let go, even if just for a while, to figure out who I was without them. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, walking away from everything I thought I knew, everything I thought was solid. But sometimes, the only way to rebuild something broken is to step away and let the dust settle. I spent a lot of time alone, thinking, questioning what had happened and what it meant for me. I felt lost, unsure of who I was without them in my life. But as the days turned into weeks, I started leaning on the people I hadn't realized I had been neglecting. The friends and family I'd put on the back burner because I was so focused on Mike and Charlotte. They were there for me in ways I hadn't expected. Their support became a lifeline. It didn't fix everything, but it gave me a little peace, a little strength. It reminded me that there's still love, still connection, still hope, even when everything feels shattered. Healing doesn't happen overnight. I won't pretend it did. There were nights when the loneliness hit me hard, and there were mornings when I woke up feeling like I was still in that fog, but slowly I began to find pieces of myself that I had forgotten. I started remembering the things that made me me, the things I loved, the things I'd put on hold because I was too busy being the friend, the husband, the guy who was always there for everyone else. I realized that I still had a future where I could find peace, a future where betrayal, while painful, didn't have to be the thing that defined me. It's been a long journey, and it's not over yet. I'm still figuring things out, still working through the pain, but I've learned something important along the way. I'm not broken. Yes, I was hurt, yes. I lost people I thought I could trust, people who meant the world to me. But I'm still standing. And that's what matters. To anyone who's gone through something similar, who's faced betrayal, lost trust, or had their world turned upside down, I want you to know this. It's okay to feel what you feel. The pain, the anger, the confusion, it's all part of the process. But don't let it define who you are. You're more than your pain. You're more than the people who let you down. The road to healing might be long, but you can get there. And when you do, you'll realize that what hurt you doesn't have to hold you back. It can make you stronger. You just have to take it one step at a time. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know this. I've learned that I'm not alone. Even when it feels like the world has turned its back on me, there's always a way forward, no matter how dark it seems. And in the end, betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning of something new. Betrayal changes you. It changes the way you see people, the way you trust, and sometimes even the way you see yourself. But it also teaches you something about who you are, about what you're capable of when the world falls apart. I don't think I'll ever fully understand why Mike and Charlotte did what they did. The pieces don't fit, and the answers don't make sense. There's no logic in betrayal. It's a messy, irrational thing, and no matter how much I try to make sense of it, the reality is, I never will. But that's okay. Not everything in life is meant to be understood. What matters now is how I move forward. I've had to rebuild my sense of self. I've had to learn how to trust again, not just in others, but in myself. And though the pain of losing both a friend and a partner is something I'll carry with me, I know it doesn't define me. I've come to realize that my worth isn't tied to the people who hurt me. I'm still here. I'm still standing. If you're going through something similar, if you're grappling with betrayal or heartbreak, I want you to know you're not alone. It may feel like the world is closing in, and you may wonder how you'll ever move forward, but you will. You will find your strength. I know it doesn't seem like it now, but one day, this pain won't hurt as much. And when that day comes, you'll look back and realize that the journey you went through, while hard, helped you grow into the person you're meant to be. Betrayal will always sting. The scars will remain. But the wounds will heal, and you'll find new people who will lift you up, new relationships that will show you that trust and love are still possible. Life has a way of surprising us, of giving us the strength to heal when we least expect it. I'd love to hear from you. If you've ever experienced betrayal like this, if you've had to face the loss of someone you trusted, I want to hear your story. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's talk about it. We all have our journeys, and sometimes sharing ours can help others feel less alone. Thank you for listening. If you're going through something difficult right now, know that healing is possible and you're stronger than you think. Take care of yourself.